Hello, everyone. Welcome to Pachehra Talks channel. My name is Arun, and I'm solutions architect with Rackspace Technology. And this is my channel, and these are my views. And today we are going to talk about Azure App Services, which is the third part in designing a compute solution. So in previous two part, we have covered all the services and the virtual machine. And today we are going to start Azure App Services. So the very first thing, I hope, because we are trying to cover AZ-305, which is Architect Expert examination, and I'm pretty sure and I hope you guys are aware of a lot of things. And if you are following this channel, you know we have already covered Azure App Service in pretty detail. But for the sake of this series, AZ-305, and this topic that we have to cover, Azure App Services, let's try to understand it first. So Azure App Service is an HTTP-based service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, mobile backends, things like that, And we have already covered in the previous video where we followed the flow chart, if you remember, and we know when to use app services. So we already know when to use app services. Now we're trying to understand what it is. So it is HTTP based hosting, web application, REST API, or mobile backends. Now the thing is, what kind of app or what language can we write app so that we can host in this app service? Well, we can develop application in multiple languages. That's the beauty of this service. There is no restriction as such, but to name some, you can write in .NET, .NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, or Python. These are all the languages that right now people are using to the maximum. So applications run and scale with ease on both Windows and Linux based environment. So what does it mean? It means when you're writing your application, you're using a language, you have to select the operating system, whether it is a Linux or Windows. It doesn't matter. You have the availability of both the operating system, and you can scale as per your need. This is the feature of this service because this is a PaaS service, managed service that we have already covered in the previous video. So app service not only adds the power of Microsoft Azure to your application, such as security, load balancing, auto scaling, and automated management. You can also take advantages of its DevOps capabilities, because under app service environment, we have covered this in pretty detail. So if you would like to go in detail, you can check that playlist. But just to cover here, we do have a deployment center where we can have the multiple options to deploy seamless integration with the Azure DevOps, such as continuous deployment from Azure DevOps, GitHub, Docker Hub, and other sources, package management, staging environment, custom domain, TLS, SSL certificates. It supports all. With app service, we pay for the Azure compute resources. We are not managing it because it's PaaS service, but we are paying for the compute resource that it's running at the back end. And that falls under the app service plan, right? Because whenever we create app service, first we create the app service plan. We'll cover that in the upcoming slides. So what is the important part here? Important part is Azure App Service is a PaaS service. It's a managed service. It's platform as service. And we focus on the website development or API logic, and Azure handles the infrastructure to run and scale our web application as per the settings that we have configured. Now let's check few benefits. A lot of them is coming from this particular session that we took for understanding the app service, but We should know all that, right? So these are some benefits we have to cover, because whenever we are talking to a customer where customer is not aware where he has to deploy his application, but he wants to move towards the modernization of the application, or he wants to move towards the PaaS services, then during the interaction you can come up with these benefits to convince the customer, if there is no issue with the compatibility, right? So the very first thing is it supports multiple languages and frameworks that we have already covered. Uh, ASP.NET, .NET Core, Java, Ruby, Node.js, PHP, Python. So it's app service has first class support for all these. Then we have a managed environment. That means Microsoft will take care of the patching and the maintenance of the operating system and things like that. Then we have containerization and Docker. It's not like it only supports the code deployment like an IS server or Apache, but you can also deploy the containerized application here, Dockerize your app, and host a custom Windows or Linux container in app service. The beauty is you can run multiple apps with Docker Compose as well, and migrate your Docker skills directly to the app service. Forget about infrastructure, forget about OS deploying Docker. Just deploy the code and it will start working. Now, DevOps optimization. We can set up continuous integration and deployment with Azure DevOps, GitHub, Bitbucket, Docker Hub, or Azure Container Registry. It supports all. And along with that, we have deployment slots here. So you can do the blue-green deployment as well. You can have multiple environment in the same app service plan, like test, stage, dev, and production. And you can keep on swapping the slots. Now, global scale with high availability. Scale up or out manually or automatically. That's supported. Host your apps anywhere in Microsoft's global data center infrastructure, and the app service SLA promises high availability. For now, it's 99.95. Doesn't matter whether single instance is running or multiple. App services is ISO, SOC, SOC, and PCI compliant. We have the features of like inbuilt authentication through Microsoft Active Directory, or like Azure Active Directory, or third-party vendors like Google, Facebook, Twitter, or Microsoft account. There is a video already created for this. The entire lab is created for this particular task, where we can simply enable the authentication on your application. No need to worry about your code. No need to change anything in the code. You just need to enable the feature on the app service, and there would be a wrapper created on your application, which will do the authentication for you. Now, app service provides turnkey core support for RESTful API scenarios and simplifies mobile app scenarios by enabling authentication, offline data sync, push notification, and more. And serverless code, we all already know the serverless code it supports. We can run a code or snippet of code or script on demand without having to explicitly provision or manage infrastructure, and pay only for the compute time our code actually uses. The best example is Azure Function, right? All right, so these are some benefits which actually combines and creates and let you understand what exactly the app service, why should we use it, what are the benefits. Now, there are the most important thing in the app service is that we talked about at the very first slide is app service plan, because app service plan is where the app service is running. This is the resources that we pay for. So we pay for the Azure compute resources that our application is running, or app service is running on or uses while it processing request. The cost is based on the kind of app service plan that we have chosen. There are multiple app service plan like free, shared, basic, standard, premium, and isolated. You'll see, and these are different features which is supported and not supported as per the plan that we have chosen. Now, if you go from left to right, It is moving towards the premium. It is moving towards more features. It is moving towards higher cost, but better performance. Free and shared do not have the dedicated environment, but basic, standard, and premium is. Isolated is entirely isolated. This is for app service environment. It is high performance security, and you get the isolation. You can run your production environment in basic, standard, and premium as well, because these are dedicated environment, but you have to choose as per your requirement, because here you can see disk space 10, 50, 250, maximum instances that we need 3, 10, and 30. Custom domains, even shared supports the custom domain that you can utilize for the testing purposes. Auto scaling, you don't have auto scaling on the basic. So if you are running a production environment and you want to have the auto scaling enabled, whether it's manual and automatic, doesn't matter. So you can use standard and premium. So similarly, we have different features as per different app service plan. Accordingly, we need to choose it, right? So this is what the app service plan. Now let's go and check some reference architecture, which will help us dig it further and put it in perspective or cement our knowledge. So this is the reference architecture where we have app service plan. Under app service plan, app services are running, and this app service, there are like 3 app services are running: production, stage, and last good known configuration kind of application. And how these are running in the deployment slots, and all the secrets are in the key vault secrets or certificates or access keys. Active Directory is using for the authentication. At the back end, there is a database, and there are multiple ways it can connect to the database. We can enable the VNet integration for the outbound request, and we can have the private link for the database so that the entire traffic will go private. We have enabled the Azure monitoring and log analytics on the diagnostics logs and the metric data. So this is a general reference architecture. The things we need to keep in mind: we need to select the right app service plan. Don't want to waste it. If there is app service plan created, even if the app services are in stopped state, still you are paying for it. So if you're not using anything, just delete it. And region, we have to select the region. We want to create app service plan and SQL database in the same region to minimize the network latency. Generally choose the region closest to our users. We all know that. We have already covered these things. Now let's go ahead and see certain important points that is required for designing purposes, or things that we should be aware of, or app service provides, and how we should configure app service. Now, if we talk about the very first, which is networking, I have already covered while talking about the architecture, the reference architecture. VNet peering, private link, both are supported by the app services, so we can use those things. There is a support for the hybrid connection as well. Now, if we talk about scaling the app service, if we talk about scaling, there are 2 ways to scale the app services. Scale up, which means the changing the instance size, for example, from basic to standard to premium. So these are, we are scaling up, just like changing the size of the virtual machine. The instance size determines the memory, number of codes, storage on each VM instances. We can scale up manually by changing the instance size or plant here. Now, scale out, we can also do the scale out, which means adding instances to handle increased load. Each pricing tier has a maximum number of instances that I already showed while comparing the pricing. We can scale out manually, changing the instance count, or by configuring auto scaling to have Azure automatically add or remove instances based on the schedule or performance metrics. If you remember, if you're following the Azure updates, we do have an update which is dynamically finding the right threshold to increase or decrease the instances. Now it doesn't count the outages, so you would have the right threshold. This part is covered in the Azure updates. This is new, and we should follow dynamic threshold because it is all done by the machine learning at the back end. Now, the reliability. At the time of this particular video that I'm creating, the SLA guaranteed by the Microsoft is 99.95%, and the app service SLA applies to both single or the multiple instances. This is the reliability of SLA. Now, app configuration. This is a wonderful feature in the app services. We need to store configuration settings as application settings on the Azure portal. Define the app settings in your template or PowerShell. How you are creating it depends on that. You can do it directly through the portal as well. At runtime, app settings are available to the application as environmental variables. So it is also kind of security feature as well. So we need not to check passwords, access key, or connection strings into the source control. We already know that. If you are following these videos that I'm creating, under DevOps we have talked about this. No, we do not push any such information in the source control. Instead, we pass secrets as a parameter to a deployment script that stores these values as app settings. And here is the tricky part. When we swap a deployment slot, the app settings are swapped by default. But we do have the authority to override this. If we need different production and staging settings, we can create app settings that stick to a slot and don't get swapped. Now, security is very important. Security in app service. App service lets you secure applications with HTTPS. Yes, to secure your app against all unencrypted connections, app service provides single-click configuration to enforce HTTPS. We can deny all the requests coming as HTTP. All should be coming as HTTPS just with one click. Or by default, your app service accepts requests from all IP addresses from the internet, but we can limit the access to a small subset of IP addresses. App service on Windows lets you define a list of IP addresses that are allowed or to access your application. Just like any other app service, we had like service firewall under network settings. We can deny all the public requests or allow only access through the application gateway, because we usually place application gateway above the app service so that we do have the WAF features and other features provided by the application gateway, and we can only allow traffic coming from application gateway to hit the app services. Those kind of things we can do here. Now, Azure app service also provides the turnkey authentication that we checked in the previous video, not the previous video, previous slide, where we can choose Azure Active Directory, Google, Twitter, those kind of things, just with a single click. It just wrap around your code, no need to change anything on the code. And authentication is something which is very important. Now, this is for the users, but what if service needs to talk to the service? For example, app service needs to talk to any other resource in the Azure. For that, app service supports managed identity and also delegation on behalf of OBO. We also call it OBO, which make delegated access to remote resources on behalf of the user. How this is actually happening? Well, with Azure Active Directory as authentication provider, your app service application can perform delegated sign in to a remote service, such as Microsoft Graph API or a remote API app in app service. So that's how we can achieve this thing. There is a way we can do that. Now, last but not the least, we cannot have a wonderful design and architecture without thinking of monitoring and diagnostic. This is absolutely, absolutely important. We have covered monitoring in detail in our old videos, previous videos, even in AZ-305, this particular series, but we'll also cover these in much more detail when we'll be covering other series as well, like security or security and compliance. But for now, we need to enable diagnostic logging, including application logging and web server logging, configure logging to use Azure Log Analytics. If you remember in the reference architecture that I showed you, there was Log Analytics, which is getting all the data and running queries on it. So use a service such as Application Insight to monitor application performance and behavior under load. Be aware of the data rate limits of Application Insight, but Insight gives you insights like pretty deep down information that you need to know for application. We can also perform the load testing using a tool such as Azure DevOps or Azure DevOps Server. So this is all about the app services for this particular series that we are trying to cover. I hope it was interesting, and thank you. Take care. Bye bye. Let's meet